Members, good morning. We've formed a quorum and it's also the appointed time. May I call the meeting to order. This morning we have two sessions until 12:55. The purpose of the special FC meeting is to consider the draft estimates 2023-24 from the administration to ensure that the amount sought will not be more than is necessary for implementing the relevant policies. May I remind members that your questions must be directly related to the draft estimates. If you would like to follow up on a government reply, please quote the number on the top right-hand corner of the page, such as EDB001. Members may press the request to speak button. If you wish to have a written reply from the administration, you can do it in writing and pass it to the Secretariat by the end of the meeting. And the supplementary questions can only follow up on the administration's reply. Depending on the number of members waiting to speak, I will allocate time for members. Secretary for Education. Thank you, Chairman. Education is the key to nurturing talent, and the expenditure on education is the most meaningful investment for the future. The 20th National Congress has highlighted the strategy of invigorating the country through science and education and developing a strong workforce for the modernization drive. The SL government should, given the opportunities brought about by the latest development of country, make development plans for education from an overall and long-term perspective and build on our unique status and advantages under one country, two systems to nurture quality talents. The government attaches great importance to education and will, along with the broad direction of invigorating the country through science and education, devote resources to further enhance our quality of education and strengthen our system on three fronts: unleashing the potential of students, improving the effectiveness of learning and teaching, and creating strong impetus for growth. The estimated total expenditure on education for this year is $114.7 billion. Initiatives include promotion of STEAM education, enhancing the professional development of teachers, vocational and professional education and training, VPAT, and post-secondary education, strengthening national education, as well as enhancing the education system. Recurrent expenditure increases by $6.3 billion to $104 billion, accounting for 18% of the estimated total government recurrent expenditure. The recurrent expenditure on education has, over the past 10 years, increased by 53% with an average growth rate of about 4.9% per annum. This demonstrates our long-term commitment to investment in education. By providing quality KG, primary, secondary, and special education and diversified post-secondary education, the EDB caters for the learning needs of students at different stages and helps them become lifelong learners who are virtuous and able with knowledge and insights, a sense of responsibility, a global perspective, positive values and attitudes, love for the country and city, and to be ready for future challenges and opportunities. Since 2017-18, a total of over $15.7 billion additional recurrent expenditure has been allocated to enhance the quality of education. In 2023-24 fiscal year, we keep on taking forward a number of measures to continuously enhance the education system. Measures for VPAT and higher education include: one, through industry institution collaboration and diversified development, will actively promote the development of VPAT to go in parallel with conventional academic education and to provide diversified pathways for young people with different aspirations and abilities and to nurture talent required for the development of Hong Kong. Two, starting from 2023-24 academic year, the VTC will launch a 2-year pilot project for secondary schools, offering an early opportunity for senior secondary school students to pursue VPAT-related programs embedded in the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education DSE curriculum and be awarded a VPAT diploma at qualifications framework level 3 alongside the DSE qualification upon graduation. This will enable students to gain an early exposure to VPAT and explore their interests with a view to broadening their VPAT articulation pathways. Will review the effectiveness of the project in 2 years' time. 3, to take forward the initiatives in the 2022 policy address, we will expand the study subsidy scheme for designated professional sectors to cover top-up degree programs and increase in phases the number of subsidized places, 3,000 per cohort, subject to the progress of the review of the post-secondary colleges ordinance Cap 320, as well as rationalize the implementation details of SSSDP and the non-means tested subsidy scheme for self-financing undergraduate students in Hong Kong to benefit students from different backgrounds with effect from 2023-24 academic year. Will launch the Diploma of Applied education program on a regular basis in 2023-24 academic year in place of the existing Diploma Yi program in order to continue to provide an alternative pathway for secondary 6 school leavers as well as adult learners to obtain a formal qualification for the purpose of employment and further study, and introduce learning management system to support enhancement to the teaching and learning of the program. We'll continue to review the implementation of the pilot project on development of applied degree programs and will launch a second batch of applied degree programs under the pilot project so as to review and foster the development of applied degree in Hong Kong and to further enhance the VPAP progression pathway at secondary education level. Will focus on industries with keen manpower demand and select programs of strong industry elements and will call priority to those industries not covered by existing applied degree programs. We will take forward the initiatives in the 2022 policy address and will gradually increase the number of research postgraduate places for university grants committee-funded universities from the existing 5,595 to 7,200 in the 2024-25 academic year. For primary and secondary education, EDB will make additional injection of $600 million into the Gifted Education Fund to enhance the support to Hong Kong Academy for Gifted Education and promote more and wider activities for gifted students. We'll also further promote STEAM education in primary and secondary schools. We'll continue to roll out small class teaching in public sector primary schools. Further to the plan to implement SCT at 31 schools from 2023-24 and 2024-25 school years, and will arrange to implement SCT at 7 additional schools from 2024-25 school year. The percentage of public sector primary schools implementing small class teaching will increase to over 90% by then, 1 year ahead of the schedule mentioned in the 2022 policy address. We will also launch the Business School Partnership Program 2.0, more business partners covering more industries to widen students' exposure and enhance life planning. For KG education, we have progressively implemented the support measures in the 2022 policy address, which include provisions to all KGs joining the kindergarten education scheme in March 2023, comprising about $58 million as the grant for promotion of Chinese art and culture, about $57 million as the Smart KG grant, and about $28 million to assist KG's creation of healthy schools. With effect from the 2023-24 school year, will simplify the application procedures for joining the scheme and will provide subsidy to facilitate the organization of experiential learning activities outside classroom for students. We'll also introduce an additional provision to KGs for employment of supply teachers as temporary relief due to illness. For parent education, we will provide funding about $100 million to assist primary schools to kickstart structural programs to tie with the curriculum framework on parent education with a view to strengthening parent education. In addition, the government will pay the examination fees for school candidates sitting for 2024 Hong Kong DSE. The estimated number of beneficiaries is about 43,200 school candidates. In conclusion, we'll continue to make good use of education resources to improve the effectiveness of teaching and learning, unleash the potential of students, and strengthen the strong impetus of growth in Hong Kong. Chairman, my colleagues and myself will be happy to take questions from members. Thank you. 40 members are waiting to speak. Mr. Chang Yong, Mr. Liang Kwok, Mr. Dennis Leung, Mr. Lai Tong Kong, Professor William Wong, Mrs. Regina Yip, Mr. Lam Chan Sing, Mr. Tong Nisi, Dr. Dick Chi Yun, Mr. Zhu Kwok Kang, Mr. Tang Fei, Mr. Rock Chen, Ms. Dr. Tang Yuan Hung, and Mr. Dominic Lee. 5 minutes each. Mr. Chang Yong. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary. My question relates to question 023 and 148. 2 questions. The first, question 023 on Quality Education Fund, and also an allocation of over $2 million for national education and security education. I support this, and the education must be effective. Now, apart from teaching within the curriculum, now you need division of labor in extracurricular activities. With a life resumed normalcy, you need to follow up on other fronts. DAB has written to the administration, people are all rushing to renew their home return permits. Can the Secretary follow up to ensure that our students can extend their current home permit for another 6 months so that they will not be deprived of the opportunity to take part in exchange activities with the mainland, because their home permits has expired. Question 148 again, related to the exchange programs with the mainland. I am involved in the preparation of some of these activities. Now, for junior and senior secondary students, if they can be given the opportunity to choose what they like, then those meetings may be more meaningful. Now, your planned activities may be excellent, but they might have already taken part in those activities before. For instance, they are interested in INT, but then your program is on poverty alleviation, which they have exposed to in the past. So, can there be optional or elective study tours? And I'd like to know the differences between the new and old programs to make them more effective. Thank you. Secretary, thank you. With regard to the first question by Mr. Chen, how we can facilitate mainland exchange tours or study tours for teachers and students, I have to thank the China Travel Service for the assistance. They have worked overtime over weekends for a few weeks to process home permit applications from students and teachers, benefiting thousands of our teachers and students. We have appealed to schools many times that teachers and students should apply for home permit return permits early so that they will not take advantage of the generosity from CTS. We can follow up, and if Mr. Chen have cases, let us know and we can follow up. And the second question is elective study tours for our students. In fact, there are many different types of mainland study tours. Under CSD subject, senior secondary students must take part in study tours. In fact, we've got 20 tours covering different itineraries and of different durations. Now, if students cannot find study tours they like, we have over 10,000 places, so that at least there can be at least one opportunity to join mainland study tour for senior primary and also junior secondary school students. We have got $100,000 under Sister School Fund. That can be another option, and understand that community organizations also organize various study tours covering subjects such as INT and poverty alleviation. Any follow-up? I think the answer is very comprehensive. Ms. Lilian Kwok, thank you. I hope the Secretary can be as perfect in answering my questions. I have got a few questions to follow up on. First, 070 is about information on new arrival students. Now, we should take this into account in education planning for newly arrived children. In the Secretary's reply, I was told that there was no information. In fact, I could find some in 2019-20, the first-time enrollment for newly arrived students from the mainland, it was 2,340. 2018-19, 2,477. 2017-19, 3,804. Very clear. I wonder why similar figures are not found in your reply. I hope the Secretary can provide supplementary data for the education sector and also for members to consider. The second question relates to 072, and that is the situation of students with autism. Now, earlier intervention and early identification has resulted in more students with autism identified. Now, I'd like to know how extra resources are being allocated to schools. Now, according to a reply, all sorts of disabilities, whether they be physical or mental, developmental, etc., there is additional resources allocated to schools. But then for primary schools, for the special education sector, I was told that the skills development schools have admitted some students with autism. Actually, they account for about 20% of the total number of students intake. Can there be extra resources for these schools so that they can employ extra manpower to help students with autism? And the third question relates to 073, reply 073. That is the number of educational psychologists and clinical psychologists employed. I see that you have been increasing the manpower, and then it will grow to 281 very soon. So we have about 1,000 public sector schools in Hong Kong. So one expert will have to look after 5 schools. And because in a school there can be up to a few thousands of, as a result, one expert will have to look after over 1,000 students. I understand that the government is committed to providing all-rounded counseling services for students, but then can you reconsider whether you should provide more resources for in-depth counseling posts in schools? Thank you.
Secretary, Chairman, I'll be very brief in the interest of time. In relation to new arriving children's figures, we no longer keep these statistics as we did before, because every day we receive the newly arrived children from the mainland, and the figures are constantly being updated. After the end of the financial year, we will provide the figures. In relation to support for children with ASD in schools for social development, Ms. Kwok is in the best position to understand that in fact we are putting in more resources in this regard. And we are keeping a close eye on the situation with more ASD students, not only in schools for social development, but in general schools as well. We closely monitor the situation. Of course, we also bear in mind the needs of development of the schools for social development. Third question, whether more resources would be deployed to support school psychologists and counseling staff. In the past 5 years, we have not relaxed our effort in supporting these professionals. Of course, we need to take a gradual and orderly approach in terms of putting in more resources. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chairman. First question. According to the administration, there will be more resources to support e-learning. And according to the Secretary, the administration will also step up STEAM education. Now, my question is whether it is possible to strengthen STEM education in primary schools. There is a shortage of STEM talents in the industry, and our goal is to promote high-quality development. In primary schools, if we have individual subjects under STEM, we need the talents. Second question, I understand that the $2,500 subsidy will be provided to primary and secondary schools for the purpose of promoting STEM. Is this a recurrent grant? And also about question 145 and 120. Now, 145 is on expansion of the sister school scheme. We asked whether information can be provided, including statistics, but according to the administration's reply, they do not keep these statistics previously the Jockey Club also had a similar initiative to promote whole person development and life-wide learning, and there is information available. If we provide subsidies to schools without keeping track of their progress, we won't be able to monitor the use of public money. Now, last question on promotion of VPET. Does the administration keep track of the progress of graduates of VPET courses? What jobs do they take up? Do you have statistics relating to, say, the nature of jobs and their income levels, so that we have a better grasp of the effectiveness of the scheme to chart a way forward on promoting VPET education and to address manpower shortage? So the question is whether you have more information available to make sure that VPET can support the future development of Hong Kong, because at the moment there are strong calls for the issue of labor shortage to be addressed and for labor to be imported. Secretary, first question about popular science among secondary and primary schools, whether individual subjects will be set up. Well, in fact, as you know, general studies cover STEAM-related elements. Primary schools help students lay a good foundation of knowledge in different aspects. And if we set up individual subjects under STEM, it will affect the curriculum. Now, apart from general studies, we also have mathematics. And in some schools, other subjects like computer science and infotech. And we have provided a supplementary guideline for schools to implement the initiatives along with indicators. About $2,500 subsidy for primary and secondary schools is a regular or it's a recurrent subsidy. Third question about sister school programs and the use of funding. As you know, every year we provide $160,000 of subsidy to each school. The sister school program covers a wide scope in terms of teachers, students, even teachers can participate in the program. Schools are required to account for they are not required to account for the program as such, but we do hope that schools can make good use of the time and resources available. We do not require schools to submit a separate report on sister schools programs. About promoting VPET, to address the issue of manpower shortage, before the start of the courses and the end, also at the end of the courses, we do take note of the students' situation. Any figures available? Is it time for the VTC representative to answer that question? Yes, but be brief. Now about VPET students, upon graduation, we conduct a survey mainly to check whether they will stay in the relevant fields for work, and according to statistics, about 85 to 98% of students remain in their respective fields. Now, is it possible to collect statistics on different matters? We'll go back and give it a thought. I also like to supplement to this answer. Now, about having separate subjects, 140 schools are now participating in a pilot scheme. We'll gauge the effectiveness and, if need be, further expand the pilot. I have a question on EDB 077. That is a leadership enhancement program for primary and secondary school principals. Because of the epidemic, the program has been suspended for a few years, but according to the figures here, in 2019, only 79 principals participated in the enhancement program. The expenditure was less than $1 million. We have so many primary and secondary schools in Hong Kong. If you confine the enhancement program to newly appointed principals, I don't think it's sufficient. According to your reply, I think that the Education Bureau only runs this program once a year. So my question is, will you consider organizing more such programs? Now, if there is a limitation in terms of providing accommodation by the National Academy of Governance, will you consider inviting the National Academy of Governance to come organize these programs in Hong Kong or operate online courses so that you can expand the leadership enhancement program to cover not only newly appointed school principals but in-service school principals, so that your training can be more effective for aspiring school principals? Secretary. To answer Mr. Lai's question about the some 70 school principals taking part in the enhancement program, the number is affected by the epidemic, as mentioned, whereas in previous years the figure stands at close to 100. Mr. Lai suggested expanding the scope to in-service school principals, such as those who have just been appointed for fewer than 3 years. We do have some training programs for them, and we also have the relevant school principals associations organizing exchanges and training programs. Now, these are not reported in this reply. In this reply, we talked about programs that are mandatory. Otherwise, we'll issue reminder letters to the schools. For the school principals training programs, especially for the newly appointed, for the first 3 years, they are required to participate in various training programs continuously. Now, I just wish to bring out this point. We should make good use of this mechanism so that school principals can receive training on the merits of school management in the mainland. That is the purpose of organizing the enhancement program in the mainland. That is why I believe you should enhance this program. Of course, I know there are different associations and operators of courses in Hong Kong, but this is essential to the development of national education and cultivating a sense of belonging to the country among parents as well as teachers. Another question relating to this reply is how you gauge the effectiveness of the program. You conduct questionnaire surveys at the end of the program. You also send inspectors to monitor the progress of the enhancement program. But these are not sufficient. After the newly appointed principals have participated in the program and returned to Hong Kong, have you conducted longitudinal studies to keep track of their progress, to see what they have really learned from the program? and also promote further exchanges with mainland professors and operate refresher courses to make sure that their learning outcomes are as effective.
Secretary. Thank you, Chair. In assessing the effectiveness of the program, we have our observation and there are reports from school principals. After each tour, within principal learning groups, they exchange views, they have sharing sessions. Of course, that was suspended during the epidemic, but now they are gradually being reinstated. Mr. Lai said that principals must attend a program at the National Academy of Governance. In fact, we're arranging a secondment of school principals to schools in the mainland. They can carry out professional observation and exchange in mainland schools. That is subject to our availability of resources and whether principals can be freed up to join the program. We will follow up afterwards. Mr. Lai can follow up with the Secretary afterwards. Professor William Wong, I'd like to ask a question on 02043. In June 2021, there was the program for outstanding scholars to Hong Kong, and there is the Global STEM Professor Scheme. There are 39 professors have arrived. They are mainly engaged in research activities. We want to be an I&T center, and therefore we need scholars that can transfer R&D outcome to commercial products. So I'd like to ask whether you will encourage universities to employ applied scholars to Hong Kong. Question EDB 221 to enhance subsidy for self-financed schools and the study subsidy scheme for designated professions and sectors in 2022-23. I think parents and students would rather want more government subsidized places because articulation to universities after associate program is not the best pathway, and the financial burden is high. The government's reply is there is no intention to increase the number of government subsidized places. Will you consider reviewing our post-secondary education sector? First, to review whether associate degrees should continue, and second, review the affordability of our parents and whether self-financed post-secondary places can be converted to UGC-funded programs. And then question 219, in the government's reply, there is a pilot scheme already implemented for applied for DAE. Now, the degree of applied studies, the government is going to choose two existing degree programs with higher demand from the relevant sectors. And then industries not covered in the first round will be given priority. You are encouraging universities to amend their current programs. You have given the responsibility to universities, or rather to institutions. I'd like to know whether you will specify industries in the second round, because in the first round you have a specified nursing, accreditation, testing, abortists, and etc. We are in the process of reindustrialization. There's Web 3.0 and also biotechnology studies. Will you provide more specific guidance for institutions so that they don't have to look for the relevant programs themselves? Thank you. The question is how under our global STEM professor scheme we can encourage institutions to employ people engaged in applied research. Now, we have not specified that it must be fundamental R&D activities. Institutions can choose professors that they need. UGC can supplement afterwards. Now, for articulation programs, there are 3 questions. I don't know whether I have enough time to respond. First, to review the need for associate programs. We already did that in our review. And the second is on self-financing programs. You might have noticed in the past few years the government has provided non-means tested subsidy to students. So many students are just paying fees similar to the level in UGC-funded institutions, and whether more higher diploma places will be offered. We have already reviewed the positioning of high diploma and also degree programs to provide more pathways for students. The development of applied degree programs, we do not rely on institutions to choose programs they like. And we have specified clearly industries that require manpower, and is clearly set out in our reply. Professor, on intellectual property, the UGC has provided funding for 8 industries to develop what they want, and then there is also funding for them. When it comes to the question asked by Professor Wong, we will work with the IT and I Bureau to support its work. The positioning of institutions and how they develop applied science programs, different institutions have their own direction. They also have to collaborate with the business sector. We will give them full support. Now I have this observation. Professor, I'm worried that universities attach too much importance on their ranking, and therefore they may have stressed too much fundamental R&D. Well, I understand that some professors might be employed because they have written a lot of papers. All right, the first degree, first year places. Every year we have 15,000 such places. We have no intention to increase this number. Taking into account the quality of our universities, the number of HKDSE students have been dropping year on year, and therefore the chance of their being admitted into your universities is higher. It will be better for the sector to respond swiftly to the need of the economy. And so the training of talents in universities can then respond more rapidly to the demand of the economy. Mrs. Regina Ip, my question is EDB 061. I invite the Secretary to look at the annex, and that is the amount disbursed. I'd like to know whether VTC is not self-financed, right? It is publicly funded. What about the Hong Kong Academy of Arts? They are self-financed. So the amounts dispersed, the Metropolitan University and also Hang Seng University have the highest amount of subsidy from the government. Many of them has got 0, or you write down NA. Characters, all right, Characters has got some funding. Characters Institute of Community Education is different from Characters College of Careers, and the Hong Kong University, etc. Many of them have only got very limited amount of funds dispersed. Is it because they have problem in enhancing their quality, or they are admitting too few students? So only a limited number of self-financing post-secondary institutions can benefit. As said by the Secretary, there are only 40,000 or so HKDSE candidates. These institutions are not very competitive, or they appear to be admitting not enough students. How are you going to deal with these institutions, Secretary? There was the question of whether VTC will receive government subsidy. In fact, it has a financing arm. All the UGC-funded universities have their own self-financing arms. And different self-financing institutions receive different amount because it depends on the number of places taken, and also the quota or the places of different programs taken up. So, and whether they can be under our SSP-DC program will depend on the quality. So this is about allocation of resources. In the self-financing sector, we want to focus on the quality and whether they can address the needs of society. We do not just disperse funds to allow these institutions to survive. Quality and healthy development is more conducive to the long-term development of self-financing institutions. We want to ensure the public funds are properly spent. After all, these institutions should be self-financing. Mrs. Regina Ip, I agree with Secretary. All sorts of expenditure in education should be student-centered. You should not cater for individual institutions. But there are institutions that have not got anything under your support measures. So there are problems with these institutions. And for some of the institutions, they relax the quota for admitting students from outside Hong Kong. Now, in this regard, we have two categories: overseas students, and second, students mainly from Macau, Taiwan, and the mainland. For this category, we have a ceiling. What is the ceiling? 20%, up to 20%. For 10% for self-financing institutions, 10%. For some, the ceiling is 20%, depending on the quality. For programs with a higher that are of quality and introduced a long time ago, then the ceiling can be 20%. For those that are newly introduced 10%, we have a ceiling for students from Taiwan, Macau, and the mainland. For overseas students, there is no ceiling. We are discussing with the institutions if they can fulfill the requirements, if they can fulfill quality programs. We are discussing with the mainland authorities to relax the quota so that Hong Kong can be an education hub.
But just to add to that, I think Secretary should make sure quality comes first, instead of merely helping the institutions to tackle under-enrollment. We need to maintain our competitiveness. Otherwise, you will be only attracting students who come here for the purpose of getting a permanent Hong Kong ID card. Next, Mr. Lam Shin Sing. Chairman, thank you. I have a question on 007, 078, and 227. 007 was a question put by Ms. Chan Ho Yan about the pilot VPET diploma to be implemented in secondary schools so that secondary students can take part in this dual-track approach to enhance the applied learning initiative. The applied learning subjects at the moment is still at the starting stage. Now, I'd like to know the development progression. For example, under the VPEC diploma, if you've identified talents who are more suited to take a VPET route in the future instead of academic pursuits, will higher diploma courses be offered to these talents? Now, another question on the pilot scheme in 078, the enrollment for certain courses are quite good, but for other courses of the diploma of applied education program, such as horticulture, arboriculture, only some 40 students were enrolled. It leaves more to be desired. Is there any way to improve the design of the program? Because you will roll out the second batch very soon. So what can you draw from this experience and make improvement? 227, asked by Mr. Edward Leung. This is about student loan. I understand that public spending is involved, and for default cases, they amount to some $100 million. There are some 6,000 default cases. Are there ways to address the problem? Of course, if you take out the loan, you must repay. Perhaps you should introduce ways to help ease their financial burden right after their graduation. In the first few years, perhaps they should not be required to repay so much, and then a few years down the road, after they've secured employment, you can demand them to repay more. The other point is to tackle the problem at source. I also took out student loan when I studied. At first, when I applied for the loan, I only signed the agreement without knowing exactly how much I would be required to repay in the future. It wasn't until I joined the workforce later that I came to know the amount I should repay every month. So perhaps you should let them have this information in advance, or perhaps introduce a ceiling to the amount of loan they can take, so that the loan amount should only cover the necessary expenses when they studied. About the pilot program, VPET diploma, the purpose is for students not only to acquire DSE qualifications, but also have exposure in VPET. so students can take DSE at the same time and attain this VPET qualification. If students don't get a good result in the DSE exam, there is another avenue available under VPET. It is pegged to the Qualifications Framework Level 3. That means that they can proceed to take studies at the level 3 of QF, such as higher diploma or degree of applied education. About the diploma of applied education, such as horticulture, bird-culture, and other courses, the enrollment situation is different from one course to another. I can defer to my colleague to supplement in a moment. I'll just say that there is a demand for diploma of applied education to address Hong Kong's manpower shortage. But there are also different views on the prospect of the different sectors and fields, and that affects enrollment. About student loans, we have introduced a series of measures to help ease the financial burden on students. For example, one of the initiatives has been extended to 2025, and we believe students have good credibility. And it is important to teach them about repaying loans once they've taken them out. We understand in the present situation, because of the economy, it is difficult to repay the sum, and we have introduced measures so that they pay only some $700 or $800 a month. I hope this doesn't pose a heavy financial burden on our young people, and we also strive to find ways to help them. BTC, say for horticulture, agriculture, and landscape, this subject is not very popular. We understand that because I know there are many choices for young people nowadays. The other point is after graduating from this program, the students are unable to get professional qualification. We're discussing with the government. We believe that if there is professional recognition of this qualification, it will help take forward the development of horticulture and arboriculture in Hong Kong, and also provide a better career prospect for graduating students. And we've also introduced flexibility in terms of taking Year 2 students. For Year 3, we have revised the structure and allow part-time courses to be run to attract more students. About the VPET diploma, I thank the Education Bureau for inviting the VTC to take it forward. Now, for secondary students, under this initiative, no matter they present to the VTC with DSE exam results or the VPET diploma result, we allow certain exemptions if they wish to be enrolled in VPET courses. I strongly support your initiative. But I understand that there is only one institution that offers professional recognition, and that's about repair of automotives. I recently visited that institution. Yes, we will review the progress and expand the scope. Mr. Zhang would like to supplement as well. Please switch on his mic. Let me supplement 2 points to what the Secretary said. If there are financial difficulties for the students to repay their loans, we will be very active in engaging in discussions with them to see how we can help them. For example, some students may wish to further their studies. They may be physically unwell, and we would be happy to discuss options with them, such as restructuring their loans or extending their loans. We also have an arrangements under which the student loans repayment can be deferred for up to 5 years. At the same time, we take other initiatives. For example, we invite them to update their address information, and we also issue them with a repayment schedule to remind them that they should follow this repayment schedule. Next, Mr. Tony Chair. I have a question on EDB 215 and 241. There is a prevailing manpower shortage in Hong Kong. Labor importation is one way out, but more importantly, I think it is more important to groom our own talent. In the construction sector, there is a general shortage of frontline construction workers, inspectors, as well as engineering professionals. On VPET, I'd like to give my strong support. In fact, in many other countries, there is the prevailing concept. The parents would like their children to take academic pursuits, but at the same time, we face a shortage of technicians. Say, if you want somebody to repair the air conditioner, you may need to wait for 10, 20 days. Of course, parents would like their children to have a better future, but we need to consider the children's aspirations and their abilities. If they take the technical path, there could be a good prospects for them as well. It's like Mr. Tong said, it's all about the prospect. So I think what is key is promotion. You have the pilot project on diploma of VPT diploma in secondary schools, and I'd also like to speak on life planning education. Now, say we talk about STEAM a lot. Apart from engineering, which is familiar to many people, there are in fact many other options. Of course, I represent my sector. People may know more about architects, but not so much about surveyors. So you should step up promotion. Simply put, the government should not only focus on engineers and doctors. You should let people know about the diversity of choices. And the other question is 241. When it comes to universities, I put this question to the Development Bureau, and this question is always referred to the Education Bureau. For training professionals, the answer is always that the universities can exercise autonomy. Apart from education and medicine, the government does not specify the number of places for other courses. Since universities are government funded, in operating courses, the universities should also consider other factors such as demand, manpower demand. The purpose of providing training is to make sure we have talents to support the industries. Why is it that you only designate the number of places for certain disciplines such as medicine and not other disciplines? Secretary, on further promotion of VPET, in fact, we have set up a promotion committee for the promotion of VPET to implement the 18 recommendations. These recommendations are gradually being implemented. We've seen improvements in terms of VPET, life planning education, and business school collaboration. We understand that improvements have been made with decline in student population. Now, we know that the situation leaves more to be decided. About reply 241. Apart from the two disciplines, education and medicine, we do not require a fixed quota to be set. While these two disciplines are very important in terms of grooming manpower, we discuss with the universities, and we also make sure we also need to make sure that the resources are put in the right place, since these are valuable public resources. So we have training for the two disciplines. We have fixed number of places for the two disciplines. As for other disciplines, as social developments are taking forward rapidly, and we also want to allow universities to deploy flexibly their grants so as to respond swiftly and flexibly to market demands.
I beg to differ. I don't think that only those two are very important to society and livelihood. Now take drivers, our aging driver population as example. That is very important. It can impact on lives. Yes, I think blue-collared jobs are have great manpower demand, and that the government should take the lead. You should not allow universities to have all the say. Yes, I agree. When it comes to STEAM and also developing Hong Kong into 8 major centers, we need not just teachers and doctors. 60% of the UGC funded school places are KPIs, and 35% of university programs must be STEAM related. Apart from our manpower planning requirements, we have added KPIs. We will also closely monitor the needs of society. For promotion of VPET, you should not just focus on students. You should promote the idea to parents as well. I'd like to follow up on question EDB 188 and 183. 188 is about the pathway of students that have completed their education in special schools. Now for 2021-22, back then, there were 8,300 odd students studying in special schools. But then, only 17 of them enrolled in programs like Yizin, and only 180 received vocational education. So only very few students that graduated from special schools have career development. Very few of them can engage in further studies or career development. In fact, there is potential for them to develop further. For those with physical handicap, there were 800 of them. Only 7 had further studies and 55 in career training. In fact, there is a lot of room for further development. How come so few of them could receive further education? 3,300 odd with mild intellectual disability. Only 142 of them had career education and 0 engage in further studies. We should consider how we can ensure students with disabilities can have further development. How much assistance are we giving them to ensure that they can have access to further studies and vocational training? And EDB 183, that is about the fall in KG student population. We have discussed that, and our education panel. I'd like to know whether resources saved can be spent on areas such as SEN students, teacher education, and parent education, and whether we can have more full-day KG education. I don't want to see a shrinkage in the KG sector during your time, Secretary. First, the pathways for students having completed special education. Of course, our overarching principle is to ensure that students can develop in ways most suitable for them, regardless of their abilities. There are different types of disabilities. We have schools provided for students with different levels of physical or mental disabilities. We've also got school for social development. The principle is with extra assistance, they can attain their maximum level of potential. So for these students, they receive basic 15 years of education, and they can have an extra year in the senior secondary level compared with their able-bodied counterpart. And we have also got different articulation pathways for them to suit their needs. When it comes to post-secondary education, we have provided additional funding in the VPET sector to procure extra equipment or to make allowance in the program to suit the needs of these students. Whether we're talking about university or VPET education, students with special needs are given extra help to promote their development. However, I hasten to add that not all students with special needs are like their able-bodied or their normal counterparts. We should not compare them with ordinary students. We will explore more ways to help students with special needs to ensure that they can develop in life as well. The drop in KG students, Dr. Take might have noticed that while our KG student population has been dropping, we have provided an extra 50% in KG education. That means we have not lowered our investment in AG education simply because of the drop in students. When it comes to the need of SEN and other areas, we are enhancing on that, such as care for non-Chinese speaking students to promote education in Chinese art and culture, smart KG, enhancing the administration and governance of KGs. We are increasing resources in these areas. That also include providing supply teachers for KGs to provide more assistance to KGs and teachers. Chair, we had over 8,000 graduates from special schools. Only 100 of them received vocational training, and only a dozen or so had further studies. Many of them are capable. For instance, in student admission, can we give some allowance for them? Many parents are of the view that their children may have minor disabilities, but they have potential as well. They want opportunities in life. Please follow up with the Secretary on cases after the meeting. I'm sure we share the common goal of helping those who need help. Mr. Chu Kwok, let me declare interest. I'm the school superintendent of a non-profit making KG. In the reply number 064, I asked about wastage of teachers. The attrition rate is 17.5%. Many of them have an average teaching experience of 13 years. That means that some of them are more experienced than that. Now, starting from 2021, the figure rose from 3.4% to 7.3% when it comes to KG teachers receiving the lowest salary. Is it because KG teachers are now junior and experienced, or is it because KGs do not have enough to pay more? Now, there is only $5,000 more. When it comes to a senior teacher and a junior teacher, they have on average 13 years of experience. On average, they will only receive $400 more in salary. The percentage increase is only 1%. It's true that they are private KGs, but then they still receive subsidy from the government. I'd like to know whether this is fair to teachers. Thank you. Secretary, for the pay of KG teachers, we have closely monitored their situation. As mentioned by Mr. Zhu, the wastage of KG teachers is higher than that of primary and secondary schools. For various reasons, the turnover of KG teachers is higher because there is no fixed establishment in KGs, and so the wastage of teachers is higher. As mentioned, the average year of service may be 13 years, but most of them have joined the service for 0 to 6 years only. That means many of the teachers are junior teachers. I've noticed that KG teachers are not as competitive. KGs are not as competitive as other industries. So some of the industries might have absorbed KG teachers. Many sectors have a shortage of manpower, and even primary schools are short of teachers. So some KGs might have switched their profession. We have a salary scale or salary scope for KGs. When we implemented the scheme, after many years of discussion, then we completed a review after 3 years of implementation of quality KG scheme. Many people in the sector are of the view that this arrangement is much better than having a salary scale because it is more flexible. KG teachers are younger, relatively speaking, and the turnover rate is high, and so that's why we have this phenomenon. The basic subsidy, government subsidy to KG is for providing quality and affordable KG education. Our purpose is not to maintain a certain number of KGs or KG teachers. Money should be spent in a way that benefit students and to provide a quality learning environment and for building a KG teaching force. The purpose is not to keep the number of KG teachers. As the chairman said, this finance committee should consider whether money is spent in a proper way and relevant to our policies. And so our purpose is to keep KG teachers with experience. We will spend money on teachers, on facilities, on parents' education. The purpose is not to maintain a certain number of KG teachers. Do you want a second round? But I have a follow-up here. I understand and agree with the Secretary that we should be student focused, but I am asking whether this remuneration system is fair. If not, it would affect the quality of KG teachers and the development of KG education. I hope the sector will continue to improve the package or remuneration of KG teachers.
Mr. Tang Fei, 158 to 160 relating to the school net. I agree with the Secretary that there is a structural problem with a school-age students' population declining. Will you consider revamping the school districts so that you don't have small districts and areas are up to 18 and 30 plus? This will help make things more flexible for parents as well as teachers and students. The other point is about 166. I put a question about modern Chinese history, but the administration's reply refers to Chinese history as general. You can teach ancient as well as modern Chinese history in senior secondary school curriculum. There are topics on modern Chinese history, but my question is mainly on enhancing the teaching and learning of modern Chinese history in junior secondary and primary schools. The other question is on 175. Many members indicated their support for VPET. Now, what is important is to take it to a higher level, that is to run applied degree courses. Will you consider upgrading some of the high diploma courses to degree courses? I mean, these are courses that are popular, whereas for the less popular sub-degree courses, you can gradually phase them out. Because instead, if you only provide students with the pathway for academic pursuits, they may not be equipped with the necessary skills. Secretary. Now for school nets, there are different principles for primary and school principals. In the there are 36 school nets for secondary schools in 18 districts. That is for primary schools rather, so that students can get a school placed near their home without the need to travel to another district. Whereas for secondary schools, there are 18 school nets. Now, this also affects flexibility in terms of school planning and parents and teachers parents and students as well, because you have thorough train arrangement for some schools. We don't want to affect these arrangements, and we resort to other means. For example, we allow places to be borrowed from another district. In a way, this provides flexibility. We don't want to affect students territory-wide and the chance of being admitted to the schools they want. About enhancing modern Chinese history learning in primary and junior secondary schools, we take a dual approach. We enhance the elements of modern Chinese history. It is difficult, however, to only focus on a particular period of the 5,000 years of Chinese history. In fact, for citizenship social development subject, we also include elements such as the relationship between Hong Kong and our country under one country, two systems. This is related to modern Chinese history. The other element is the 40 years of reform and opening up of our country. Again, this is related to modern Chinese history. About VPET, to answer your third question, whether we'll consider converting higher diploma courses to degree courses, especially the more popular high diploma courses, we need to consider the different skills requirements for different sectors. It may not be useful to convert all high diploma courses to degree courses. So we need to create a ladder to packed at different levels to meet the manpower needs. I agree with you, Secretary, about revamping the school net. Like Mr. Tang Fei said, that there are many factors at play. Mr. Rock-Chan, I have two questions, 031 and 033. In 031, regarding the mainland university study subsidy scheme, in recent years, there has been an increase in terms of the number of recipients and the subsidy amount. My question is there any room to provide more resources to subsidize more recipients with a higher subsidy amount? The other question is on 033 about the wastage rates of teachers in recent years. The figure stands at 6,300, and the situation is dire. And this is only the figure for public sector secondary and primary schools. I believe the total number is much more. Are there ways to replenish the teaching force? And I am more concerned about the in-service teachers and their workload, whether this will affect the teaching, the quality of teaching. The first question on increasing the quotas under the MUSSS, Mainland University Study Subsidy Scheme. We don't introduce a ceiling for the number of recipients. As for the subsidy amount, we believe the amount is appropriate at this stage. We will keep in view the latest developments. About the wastage of teachers, it seems that in recent years the wastage rates have increased due to various reasons. For example, it has to do with the aging population and also the also more teachers retiring in recent years. As they reach the age of 60, we have establishment arrangements for public sector schools, so these posts will have to be filled. Despite an increase in the wastage rates of teachers, we find that the establishment of public sector primary secondary schools are working well, and will closely discuss with the sector and suitably make adjustments in terms of the training quota for teachers. Any follow-up, Mr. Rock-Chan? Secretary just now mentioned the teaching establishment. Of course, I understand that. My question is whether you can find sufficient candidates to fill the vacancies. There may be teachers leaving the establishment because of retirement and other reasons. My question is whether you'll be able to fill the vacancies. All right. So some teachers have left. Say 4 teachers have left this school. Is there any mechanism to make sure you find graduates or other teachers to fill the 4 posts? Yes, of course. If you work in the front line, you know that we have a sufficient supply of teachers. These teachers might previously worked as teaching assistants. So when we have more vacancies, these teaching assistants who have acquired experience for a number of years will be able to take up these posts. Dr. Tan Yueheng. I have a question on 020 about the strength of the teaching force. Mr. Rock-Chan just now touched on the same issue about the wastage rates of teachers. In 020, I understand that for public sector primary schools, Altogether, 1,910 teachers have left. For public sector secondary schools, altogether 2,240 teachers have left the force. Now, the Secretary just now mentioned that despite teachers leaving their posts, the operation of schools remains sound, and schools are able to find candidates to fill the vacancies. In terms of newly recruits vis-a-vis teachers leaving their posts, can you explain to me whether you have recruited more qualified new teachers than the number of teachers leaving the service? Because even with a fewer number of teachers recruited, if you're able to maintain normal operation of schools, that means there is a surplus. So will there be a change in your planning for the teaching force in the future? Also, another question on mainland exchanges. That's in EDB 067. In recent months, the mainland exchange programs for the Education Bureau have resumed, and I've looked up information, especially in relation to mainland study tours. They're mostly concentrated in Guangdong Province and the Greater Bay Area. Guangdong is very close to Hong Kong. We share the same language and culture. However, it's only part of mainland China. There are different places in the mainland China, such as the Yangtze River, Beijing, Xi'an, Chongqing. Is it possible to conduct mainland exchange programs with places farther away on a deeper level? Secretary. First, about wastage of teachers, whether there is a regular planning. As I mentioned just now, we've all along been keeping a close eye on the change in the establishment. If my memory serves me right, we have recruited more new teachers than the number of teachers leaving the post to fill the vacancies to maintain the establishment. It's just normal. Now, regarding mainland exchanges, as mentioned previously, as the epidemic subsides and normalcy is resumed, we've started mainland exchange with Guangdong Province as a starting point, and in the future we'll organize more study tours with other places in the mainland on different topics. As for the subject of citizenship and social development, after resumption of normal travel arrangements with the mainland, exchange programs have been conducted with more faraway cities in the mainland under the sister schools programs. So apart from the mainland exchange programs under the Education Bureau, we also have the sister school programs exchanges, and also study tours and exchanges for teachers, and on topics such as Chinese history. We have different thematic exchange tours. The member mentioned Xi'an, Nanjing. Cities are rich in historical resources. We have included them in our exchange programs as well. Right, on newly recruited teachers, the number is more than the number of teachers leaving the service. I think we need to spell it out, and this is a good deed. Now, if we're able to recruit more teachers than the teachers leaving the post, then there is no manpower shortage. Let me correct. I'm sorry. In terms of establishment, we haven't scaled back the establishment. To answer your question on the number of new recruits vis-a-vis the number of leaving teachers, But schools can flexibly deploy their resources. They can use the grant for the establishment to recruit other personnel to fill the establishment.
Members, 5 members are waiting to speak the first time, and Mr. Chu, the second, have to draw a line now. Mr. Dominic Lee. Thank you. I'd like to follow up on question 005 on national education. Mr. Chai Hat-Ken asked what mechanism is in place to evaluate the teaching standard and performance of teachers of national education. I'm somehow disappointed to see the Secretary's reply. The reply is under the school-based management spirit. The responsibility is on schools. I think you have shifted the responsibility to schools, given that national education is such an important subject. You cannot shirk your responsibility. You talked about visiting schools and conducting visits. Well, if this system works, how about the tragedy related to the children's home? Now, if visits work, then we won't have to wait until we had online lessons. You found out that a teacher said that the Opium War was initiated because of a ban on tobacco. So will you evaluate your mechanism to ensure that teaching has not deviated from the original objective? Secretary, we attach a lot of importance to the quality of national education because we have a whole school approach with multiple pathways. And if we are to closely monitor the whole implementation, we have to cover all subjects. That's why we say that this is a school-based approach, because all subjects, all activities, and all curricula are included. If we rely on the EDB to monitor remotely or on-site, then it would be rather unrealistic. So I agree that EDB has an unshakable responsibility in the implementation of national education. Still, we have the spirit of empowerment and accountability in school-based management, and school management has the ultimate responsibility. And we must ensure that there is no deviation from the teaching objective. We should not follow up until this has happened. We have several levels of teacher training. First, all teachers have to pass the Basic Law and National Security Law before joining the teaching force. Secondly, in the core training of teachers, we require teachers to have time to take part in training of the Basic Law and National Security Law to ensure that their knowledge and understanding is correct, so they will not impart wrong information to students. When it comes to how their teaching can be flexible and lively, that can be further considered. What if teachers have taught wrong information to students? We have inspection of classes, etc. In CSD, which has started for only 1 year. Now, for the first year, we have directorate grade officers from EDB to inspect all classes and all schools, and after that, sharing sessions were given to tell schools what and how the subject is properly taught. Mr. Lee, the Secretary said the training has been given to students. Now, I just quote an example. What started the Opium War? I don't believe that the teacher did not know that the war started not because the UK wanted to impose a tobacco ban. So that's why I'm talking about remote video monitoring. I'm not saying that it should be applied to all classes, but if you have this kind of monitoring, then teachers will be deterred from imparting information, wrong information knowingly. Thank you. We gatekeep at the curriculum level, and we also monitor the situation. While I won't discuss individual cases here, but if teachers have deliberately taught wrong things to teachers, that means they may not know the spirit of, or they do not know the content well enough, and that has something to do with their teaching preparation. We can enhance in this area. Teachers are role models of teachers, of students. Their words and deeds can have a lifelong impact on students. It's not just the Opium War. Whatever subject or content the teachers are teaching, they can have a lifelong impact on students. We have reviewed and updated the professional guidelines for teachers. Mr. Lee, well, even at extracurricular activities, teachers can teach wrong things to students. That is beyond your control. Dr. Priscilla Lau, in the education on the National Security Education Day, Mr. Xia Baolong made it very clear that we must have one country, two systems, and national security before we can have prosperity and stability. Whether we are talking about legislation on the national security law and legislation to implement Article 23 of the Basic Law, the education sector, the civil service, and the legal sector are three very important sectors. They have to promote the merits of national security. It's not good enough if they take a defensive approach. We must tell people clearly the advantages of national security. For those in the business sector, they know very well that we need national security in order to resume normalcy. For the teaching or for the education sector, for the civil service and the legal sector, I have higher expectations of them. They have to ensure that they bring out messages that help Hong Kong to fully support and welcome the implementation of the national security law and legislation to implement Article 23, because these three sectors are well trusted by the community. The education sector in particular is dealing with underage people. We have got academic, or we have lecturers in universities that have harmed our young people. My question is number 110. You have worked very hard and you've made it very clear that the integrity, the conduct, and the words and deeds of teachers are very important because they are well trusted by their students. Many teachers have become problematic, and 4 teachers have been disqualified after your investigation. I don't think this has reflected the whole picture. I'm from the legal sector. To disqualify a teacher, it's okay if you give him the responsibility or the opportunity of an oral representation. It's okay if a teacher is not suitable, he should not remain in the teaching force. I'm of the view that 4 is too few. I have complained against over 100 cases. Many of them were very serious cases. Someone who is not suitable to be a teacher should leave the teaching force. He should not stay behind to harm our young people, generation after generation. Some may not like National Security Education Day and what they think is going to harm our students. Secretary, will you take these cases very seriously? Yes. As mentioned by Dr. Leung, we take the conduct of teachers very seriously. We've always stressed that the values and conduct and integrity of teachers have profound impact on our students. The number of teachers disqualified, Dr. Leung might be asking about the figure for a particular period. In fact, for this year, we have disqualified 21 teachers. Of course, we do not have any KPIs. We want the number to be 0, but if we have identified black apples in the profession, we will not refrain from disqualifying them, because we have to gatekeep for our students and for national security. As mentioned, if teachers have breached the professional conduct, we do not just disqualify them. We provide oral and written warnings. We have different types of sanctions to let teachers know the consequences of their action and they know how to behave. Just one more sentence. Secretary, you must monitor the professors of universities more clearly. They have very flimsy idea of our country, and some of them have very poor conduct and values. You must keep a close eye on these people. Thank you. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Question number 129. Subsidy for university education in the mainland. As mentioned by members, more and more students have chosen to pursue their studies in the mainland. They need subsidies and they need support, and according to the reply, the administration will maintain very close liaison with the universities. I think more important still is to maintain liaison with Hong Kong students studying in the mainland. I'd like to know whether you have any channels for communication of the mainland and to find out whether they have encountered any difficulties there. On the same question, we encourage students to broaden their horizon, to develop a global perspective. Studying in the mainland is a good option. Will the administration consider conducting tracking studies to enhance our understanding of the challenges faced by students there and also their career pathways? The government likes to recruit from mainland graduates as well to our civil service. For instance, will you also approach Hong Kong students studying in the mainland as well? Another question is EDB 132 related to STEAM education and mentioned by many colleagues already. Recently, the administration has attached importance to STEAM education. We fully support them. There are more guidelines for primary and secondary schools to flexibly increase the number of teaching hours. But STEAM has to compete for teaching time with other areas such as media literacy, mainland study tours, etc. Given that there is fierce competition for teaching hours, how can you ensure that our students are properly equipped under STEAM education so that we have talents for INT development in the country? And how do you build up a STEAM ecosystem in society? How could we ensure that in the community, among our grassroots, we have more young people exposed to STEAM education? Thank you.
Secretary, about support for students furthering their studies in the mainland, especially Hong Kong students studying in the mainland. Recently, I visited the mainland on a number of occasions, including the Greater Bay Area cities and other cities. And on each occasion, I met with Hong Kong youths and students studying in the mainland. I understand that there are different organizations, different youth associations in different cities for the purpose of maintaining liaison with the Hong Kong students. In the future, we will consider setting up a platform to step up liaison to keep track of the studies and employment in the mainland. For example, recently I met with some Hong Kong young people working for Alibaba in Guangzhou, and we also keep in touch with students studying outside the Greater Bay Area. In fact, some associations submit a report on a yearly basis to give us an idea. In fact, the Hong Kong students and youths form their own association and conduct surveys on the employment and the living conditions of Hong Kong young people in the mainland. The second question is on promoting studies in the mainland and conducting tracking studies. As mentioned just now, we'll keep track of the figures. And indeed, we have received a surge of applications for Hong Kong students to study in the mainland. We've seen an increase in the number of Hong Kong students taking studies in the mainland, and we will keep in view their development in the future. About STEAM education, in this new era, it is never enough to provide enough class hours. So in the primary school, we have made arrangements. In the secondary schools, we have also make way for do away with lessons and make way for more time for students to learn about STEAM. As far as class time is concerned, we will refine the structure of STEM subjects. We also provide more. We also set KPIs to provide more study time for STEM and for students, aspiring students, to take these subjects at the senior secondary level. There's been an increase in the number of students taking these subjects. Apart from cultivating amongst students the interest in STEM, we also support elite students, so to speak. For example, we have injected $600 million in the Gifted Education Fund for more activities to be arranged for our cream of the crop students, so that they can undertake a training for international events and competitions. Next, Dr. Chow Man Kwong. Good morning, Chairman, Secretary. Thank you. Altogether, electrical members have put in 243 questions relating to this year's budget on education. We're all concerned about education. I have a question on 087 and 041. 087 relates to MUSSS. mainland university study subsidy scheme, and the latest application figure is 4,951. Now altogether there are some 7,000 new students every year. And for the three cohorts, there should be some 3,000 students altogether. So this number of applicants seems to be on the low side. Will you set up promotion of the mainland university study subsidy scheme? There are many grassroots students who are in need of the subsidy. You're spending not even $60 million a year on the scheme. Next, on life planning, education, and internship opportunities, is there a systemic way to attract these students to come back to Hong Kong for internship and development opportunities? Since we have an aging population. Now, I'm more concerned about a comparison between the number of students furthering their studies in Taiwan and in the mainland. Now, in the 60s, many students furthered their studies in Taiwan. Nowadays, as of 2021, the figure stood at 3,110. Now the figure has come down to some 2,000. Still, it's 1/3 of the number of students going to the mainland. But after graduation, these students graduating from Taiwan institutions only earn $8,000 a month. Are there ways to promote and retain students in furthering their studies in Hong Kong? You need to explain to students about the prospects in the future. And about question for reply number 41, the school nominations direct admission scheme. Each school gets 2 nomination quotas. Altogether, 766 valid nominations were received from 403 secondary schools under this scheme. These students should be given a target. For example, after being selected, they should remain in Hong Kong and serve society for 5 to 10 years. Something should be done by the Education Bureau. These are invaluable resources. Secretary. First question about MUSSS will step up promotion. We take on board members' views. And in fact, every time I meet with a student, I will explain the same to him. We need to take a scientific approach in promoting the MUSSS. Every year there is an arrangement for the recruitment or the admission of students into mainland universities without taking public examination. We make use of that occasion to explain to students as well. To answer your second question about life planning and attracting students to come back for development, we encourage students to come back for further development and for internship opportunities. We hope that the Hong Kong enterprises can provide internship for students returning from the mainland as well, to dovetail with the learning experience in the mainland as well as the employment situation in Hong Kong. About school nominations direct admission scheme, that is for school principals to directly nominate students to get into universities. We'll consider how this can better support the manpower needs in Hong Kong. We need to take into account a number of factors. As the member said, we will consider, for example, whether we can impose a requirement for the student beneficiaries to remain in Hong Kong upon graduation. Now, school principals make the nomination because they are of the view that these students have the caliber. And if we include this as a factor, we need to consider whether a balance has been struck and whether this will affect their consideration of making nominations. Just to add to what Dr. Chow Man Kwong said, some 4,000 students were admitted under the MUSSS. Now, in fact, for the scheme, it's divided into means tested and non-means tested. For non-means tested, if you apply for the subsidy, you will get it. For means tested, it will be subject to a means test. Now, about students furthering their studies in Taiwan and in the mainland, these are two sets of figures. For the mainland, for Hong Kong students accepted by mainland universities, the enrollment rate is quite high. They enrolled in popular courses. The competition is quite keen, whereas for those furthering their studies in Taiwan, it's not as competitive in terms of school ranking and school fees. Professor Lau Chi Pang, I have a question on 291 or 091. This is about Diploma Yijin program being replaced by the Diploma of Applied Education program. Will it become a standalone program, or will it become a pilot of as a part of the VPAT progression pathway? According to your reply, the DAE program helps students attain a level 2 standard in 5 subjects in the Hong Kong DS examination. It is also equivalent to level 3 of the qualifications framework. Students can then decide to further progress their studies under VPAT pathway or to join the workforce. Now that seems to be a good idea, but it should be publicized to the public, because otherwise it's just a change of title from Diploma Yijin program, which is also pitched at level 3 of QF. Now, say the attainment of level 2 standard in 5 subjects in a DSE examination. If you talk about these students joining the workforce with this education attainment, we're talking about more labor-intensive jobs for them, manual jobs for them. Even for degree holders, the job situation is not as optimistic. So my question is whether the DAE program is aligned with the VPET progression pathway. You need to level with the students that, frankly, if you attain level 2 in 5 subjects of DSE, you probably can't get into university. But then if you take the VPAT pathway, you can get, you can receive further technical training. Perhaps you can attain a level 4 of QF before you join the workforce. So my question is whether you can walk the extra mile and make sure that the DAE program is better aligned with the VPAT progression pathway. Secretary. I agree with Professor Pang. The purpose of replacing Diploma Yijin program with DAE program is to further refine the articulation to VPAT, and that is why in terms of design of the program, we place strong emphasis on the VPAT element for smooth articulation. In terms of qualification, apart from pitching it at level 2 in 5 subjects of DSE, we also include more VPAT related elements, including placement opportunities, and we also include the vocational Chinese and English elements in the Chinese and English language courses. This will make the program more aligned with the VPAT progression pathway. The program seeks to provide another option for secondary school leavers. And this program will provide a pathway to VPET. Professor Lau, I take your point. Now, when you roll out the DAE program, will you enhance publicity? To illustrate very clearly the relationship between DAE program and VPET, and to invite the vocational institutions to take part in the publicity effort as well. I support that as well.
Mr. Chu Kwok Kang, thank you. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on EDB 052, the taking of local students by international schools. International schools are set up to fulfill the need for school places from parents who come to Hong Kong for work, or for families who come to Hong Kong for work, whatever. The purpose is not to take local students. Now, because of the epidemic, there is loss of students in international schools, and according to reply, there are 2 schools who over-enroll students against the rule, and ESF schools also admit students over non-local students more than what is stipulated in the service agreement with the government. Now, international schools, because they are enrolling local schools, they have transferred the problem to local schools, and international schools are treated differently by the administration from local schools. They break the rules, they received a warning, and they continue to do so. Why don't you follow the example of Singapore? They put a cap on the number of local students that can be enrolled in international schools. Otherwise, we may affect the source of students for local schools. Thank you. When we entered into service agreement with international schools, we have put a cap for the admission of local schools for each of them. And therefore, if they have violated this term, we will issue warning letters. How come we have a cap for local students in international schools? Because we want local students to have a wide horizon. After all, parents pay the fees of international schools. There is no government subsidy. Mr. G asked us to control the number of local students in international schools. Will they choose local schools as a result? Will they rather go attend school in the GBA or in neighboring cities? Now, we have to ensure that local schools serve local families first. To be competitive, we should not restrict the admission of international schools in order to ensure that there are students for our local schools. I don't think the causal effect is that simple, Mr. Zhu. Now, given that you have issued warning letters, that means there are problems with these international schools. If they continue to violate the rule, will there be any consequence? For sure there is. Because in our service agreements with international schools, there is a fixed term. We will review their services on a regular basis, and we will also consider their violations. Thank you. But I think this will only continue. With the low birth rate in Hong Kong, we don't have enough students. Sooner or later, local schools will not be admitting enough students, and you have to reconcile this problem. With our plan to draw for talents, many young families will come to Hong Kong from overseas. I have heard views that there is a great demand for international school places. to a certain extent, we have to ensure the capacity of our international schools because this is an important part in training for manpower from all over the world. Well, there will be more students going to international schools as a result. That ends this session. Thank you, Secretary, and your team for attending this part of the meeting. We will start again at 10:10 a.m.